Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Connecting the Dots. Joining me on this one is Steph Walsh, a self-employed animator, and she's here to talk about the impact of 2D animation. Steph, welcome.
Well, hello, Neil. Hello, anyone and everyone who is actually watching today. I don't know whether this actually goes out live at some point or obviously not because we're recording it now. So it will be for whoever actually wants to sit through the entirety of it. So thank you for inviting me, Neil. We did have already a number of chats, of course, before we sat down today to record this for your podcast.
Yeah, this has been weeks in the making, months in the making, possibly, because we have been talking for a few months, but it's great to finally have you on. And yeah, we've got to keep the audiences waiting a bit longer, but I'm sure when this comes out, they'll all be rushing to my YouTube channel to check it out. So can you start by giving the audience a summary of your career so far and some of the key things you've learned along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. I will start from the key things I learned, which is pivot as quickly as possible as soon as you actually realize you're not in the right place for you. So kids, listen to that. But I actually started working 23 years ago in a classic Gen Z, or in fact, Gen X fashion. I'm always thinking about Gen Z because I've actually met a few of them and I actually think they're really sharp, and I will get to that point in a second. In Gen X fashion, because that's who I am, I just had no idea where I was actually going to go after the uni. And so I randomly started to apply to graduate schemes at the time when there was still a career office at the uni and all of those applications were on paper. So this will sound like I'm from the Middle Ages. I just sent off a batch of them, and eventually I actually landed in the graduate scheme at Accenture. So I worked as an IT and management consultant with different job titles, as is often the case in IT, but more or less doing the same stuff for 22 years. And I worked at Accenture and IBM for several years. I think we got to almost 15, when I tally the two of them together. Worked on many, many clients. Then I went solo as a consultant, working for HSBC, Barclays, Lloyds, as a partner of Silver Lake private equity as well, which was fun and very taxing. And and then eventually, on my last redundancy, because I did not have just one rodeo, but quite a few of them, on my last redundancy at the end of 2022, I actually thought, maybe I will look for another job, which I did for a scant number of months, about three or four. And then I thought, perhaps I can actually do something with those animating videos, you know, that I had already been making because I am a self-taught, 2D animator. And uh, and that's exactly what I did, and that's exactly what I've been doing effectively since the beginning of 2023. And I love it. And that's why I actually said, kids, pivot as soon as possible, as soon as you actually realize that the place for you, or that you thought was the place for you, is not the right place for you. Because my only regret is to have done it sooner. True, I didn't know jack shit about animation 15 years ago, or 18 or 20. I know that I wanted to do it, but I somewhat thought or felt that I may have missed the boat. And that's something that sort of leads me to that Gen Z that I actually mentioned at the beginning, because I actually think that this younger generation is really, on the job in actually doing what they actually feel is going to be good for them. I love to hear and read that, for example, they're putting the foot down insofar as, going back to the office, going in the office, being at the office, or effectively giving up your life to your employer. And I think that that's a very smart and loving thing to do. And the sooner, younger people realize that you only get one life, you only have those 4,000 weeks, as Oliver Burke once said in his wonderful book, then the better for you and your life and your family. So that's where I am now, finally doing something that I really love.
Yeah, and I mean you've worked with some absolutely huge companies like you said there,
Yeah.
IBM, etc. All that experience that you had. I mean, how do you feel that that's equipped you to do what you're doing now, both in terms of the actual profession itself, but also kind of some of the life skills that you picked up along the way?
Well, I would say that I have actually learned to churn out documents that are really professional. That
Mm,
much I actually have to say, because, for example, on occasion, I actually responded to requests for informations or requests for proposals, because some big companies do that in order to get animated videos made. And there's no doubt in my mind that, all of the commissions that I've landed in that fashion, I did land because I knew exactly how you actually respond to a request for a proposal. Because, of course, when I was working for those big companies, I was either putting it together before we actually went to tender, or I was looking at them, of course, when the companies when the company itself was receiving them. So I've always loved writing anyway, you know that, because we share that interest and that passion. So it never felt difficult for me to learn to write really good documents. And I think the best thing that I actually got from working for all these multinational companies has been, knowing what good looks like and actually being able to write that good for I myself in my additional endeavors as we do today.
mhm. So you call yourself the feel good animator on LinkedIn. What does the word feel good mean to you in the context of animation and more specifically your approach to animation?
Yes, I actually wanted to create something that no matter what that is, and it could be a video CV, or it could be, a video for a conference, or it could be a video about stock and security, and I've made quite a few of those. I just wanted to give that sort of feel to whoever is watching it, to just make them smile a little bit, because very often when when you're doing a training video, when you have to sit through that sort of stuff, as I did many many times, I'll never forget how boring those videos are. The sort of training I used to do for financial services, when I was sitting through the training at Lloyd's, Barclays, at HSBC, even though it was in relatively recent years, so I'm talking history of maybe 2012 or 2014 or 2008, something like that. So we're not talking the Middle Ages here. I remember sitting through supposed animated videos that were not videos at all, that were really PowerPoints, with they were PowerPoint training with, some animating effects
Mm,
dropped in when, for example, an image was coming in and going out, and or when, the writing was actually um, showing up on screen. So I do remember that I felt, oh my God, there has to be a better way of doing this stuff, particularly in training, because, at the time I was working for those sort of companies. And so it so just happened that about 8 years ago, I was tasked at the company I was at the time, and we were doing, financial services. I was tasked with creating some training for my colleagues, and I immediately jumped up and I said, "Oh, why don't we actually use some animating software?" And note that up until that point, I really had it within me. I really, really wanted to make animated videos, but I didn't know jack shit of how to make them. I just knew what really ugly and boring and bad looked like. And so they sort of they agree with me and they said, "Oh, Steph, go ahead, fill your boots. If you actually know how to make them, we'll script them, we'll create them, and all of that." And so I did this whole classic procurement jazz of looking at different software, and there's a huge number of them out there. And then, as a company, we picked one, and I basically, set off to teach myself to use the software. And in no time whatsoever, even though we're still talking about months, because we are talking also about a suite of training videos, in no time, in the grand scheme of things, I was actually able to start churning out those videos. Now, when I look back at them, and it's too bad that I cannot show them for obvious reasons, right? When you're making training videos, they're under NDA, and a bank, a company, and anyone is not going to, like me, going out there to flog their internal training, for obvious reasons.
yeah.
But when I do look at them, and sometimes I do, I can actually see how much better at it I am now. The videos, even though there were videos that were very, very static, I still did not understand how much I could actually do and how what sort of feel I could instill into a scene simply by moving the camera. I didn't know how to do these things, which seems like a ridiculous thing now because with the camera movement, I use it all the time. I actually sort of tell the story by transitioning, by using different transition effects in different scenes, by moving the cameras, by even zooming into the character's face, sometimes very, very, very close to the eyes. So um, I taught myself a lot just by doing something for training purposes, and then I just simply took it from there, to be honest. And I do think that I have succeeded now in creating the types of videos, particularly video CVs or introductory videos, that do stop people in their tracks simply because even though 2D animation has been around for centuries effectively, no one actually uses it, for the purposes of like for business purposes, really. Sometimes we see animation all the time, right?
Yeah.
Because it's out there everywhere, and animation is not just cartoons, but specifically, of course, you know that I'm talking about 2D character-based animation, those twee little characters that are talking to each other, or maybe they are not talking and something is happening in the background. Or if you consider the video that I put together last year, my boyfriend did all of the audio, all of the soundscape. And Stasia Keo, who is my collaborator and work wife, as I like to say, she voiced the entirety of All the Places You Go by Dr. Seuss. And we made an end-to-end 11-minute video. So, it's that feel of, oh, I'm looking at something really quite nice, really, dare I say, twee, because I say that, I use that term all the time, that I find is what I do best and what I have the courage and the guts to put out there for a business. I am making videos for a GP now. I'm making videos for a property consultant. I've made videos in SOC and security. So they are the sort of environments whereby there is an expectation that you look all stiff and serious, all business-like. And business-like is used as a synonymous for that sort of level of seriousness, which I find really annoying because um, you don't need to be all stiff and serious and boring to convey a really good message. You can do that,
Yeah.
with funny writing, as you know very well. You can do that with nice little animated videos, and certainly all of the people who actually had video CVs made by me have actually found that once you actually submit a video CV, you really do stop a recruiter in their tracks
Mhm.
because they are no longer snowed under, 1,000 PDFs that they don't want to look at, but they actually really, take notice of a video, particularly if it is animated.
Yeah. Um, that's a huge thing as well, like video CVs. I know of at least one or two companies that specialize in providing that as well. So it's definitely a big upcoming trend for sure, or maybe not even upcoming. I think it's just a big trend right now.
Yeah, Neil, I think that it's sort of really already happening because I remember that about 3 years ago, or possibly 4 years ago, I was just like browsing online for no reason, as we do. And I did come across a number of startups, for example, that now create mini career websites on their own websites. And they do ask a candidate to submit a 30-second introduction, video introduction. And obviously, a lot of people just pick up their phone or they enable the camera here on the desktop and they just record themselves like that. And I'm like, I mean, okay, more power to you. But when you actually upload an animated self, an animated you, I can guarantee you that you will hear back from people. And in fact, there was a company that when I actually did something like that, they go back to me and they said, forget about the job. We were wondering if you could make some videos for us. Because, of course, in that introduction, even though it was 30 seconds, I said, well, right now I'm sort of making 2D animated videos.
Does that mean then that I can't put things like results driven and team player on my CV anymore. I can't just write a load of text and just there you go, there's my application.
Well, you can read that as you voice yourself if that's what you do want.
Yeah.
But we were discussing about, those type of turns of phrases today on LinkedIn in one of your posts, and I actually think that they've become pretty meaningless and sort of pointless. And whilst I do appreciate that businesses like to, talk in a certain way, well, I think the more creative people, whether we're writing, whether we are script writing, whether we're making videos, whether we're making songs or whatever, or indeed whether we are effectively, we're all under marketing, you could say that. I think that we tend to reject the overused, we tend to reject cliches, we tend to reject that whole results driven product oriented, or whatever else is actually being used left and right. It doesn't really mean anything.
No. And one thing that you said right at the start of your previous answer, which has stuck with me, is putting smiles on people's faces and conveying information that really means something to people. So you see a lot of superfluous information out there. And one thing I'm quite keen to ask you, and this wasn't something that I've briefed you on, so I apologize for going a bit off piste here, but have you ever had to do, um, as an animator, have you ever had to do kind of expectation management in the sense of what a client wants and what they think they should say in the videos and how they think they should come across is completely different to what you might think it would put a smile on people's face or would resonate the most with people. Have you had to have conversations like that in the past where you've had to say to them, look, I know you want it to be all about this, but I think actually it should be a lot more X, Y, and Z.
I tend to steer a little bit. So, yes, of course, as I do have a really extensive consulting background, I'm also very used to sort of managing those type of conversations, right? So I found myself in a sort of situation, for example, in which I've actually advised how best I actually think certain videos should be presented. So I can make this example because I'm close to this current client, and as I said to you, he's a GP, and we were discussing at the end of last year what sort of videos we actually wanted to make for the forthcoming year. And so, you can imagine the GP, the classic situation is January, healthy habits, healthy this, healthy that, the sorts of stuff that gets peddled even by magazines and articles everywhere. So we did want to do an element of a healthy new you. But I remember that I actually suggested to the GP, instead of actually having you in the video talking to your patients about what healthy habits, should actually look like, in this new year for them. How about we put you, so I created, of course, his character, his GP character in the video, but I'm going to do the voiceover and I'm going to describe how hard you, the GP, you are finding the beginning of the year. You started the year with all of these wonderful, best intentions about the gym, but getting up early in the morning when it's actually so dark and so cold is a slog, and walking to the gym is a slog, and then you're arriving at the gym and I got his character that is really, really struggling to actually use some ways and stuff like that. So I basically just did exactly what we said we were going to do, a healthy new you, but I actually turned our GP in the character who is suffering to try and establish some fresh new habits because it's hard to change your habits. That's the reality.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yes, I do that, and I tend to do it quite often. In in other instances, I've actually had people trusting me implicitly 100%. So I have had a number of clients showing up. Someone actually saw my website and said, "Steph, love everything I've seen on your website. No one does it. No one uses all this cartoon-based stuff. I want the same for me." So, when someone approaches you like that, and they just immediately wanted to get your idea and they want to take your stir, and they're basically giving you the so-called carte blanche to be able to do whatever it is that you feel you should do, then that's really nice and ideal. But at the same time, I always want to ensure that I've been able to extrapolate what they really wanted to say deep within themselves. Because even someone who shows up, on my Zoom and says, "Oh, I've got no creative ideas." Well,
Mm.
yeah, and also no. They may feel like they haven't got any, but there must be a reason as to why they actually want me to make a video for them. So
Yeah.
generally, I actually extrapolate things that I know, that I figure out are important to them, so that the video actually meets their expectations, even when they don't know what their expectations are.
That's an amazing value proposition, by the way. Extrapolating details buried deep within yourself, that you may not have uncovered yet, but you can help them uncover. It's brilliant. Um, that's really good. So just for like, in layman's terms, for people watching this who don't have an animation background, what is 2D animation in a nutshell, and how does it differ from things like 3D animation, for instance?
Of course, very, very simple. Everybody can understand that, Neil. I mean, if you're looking at a painting, that's a 2D. You're looking at a sculpture, that's a 3D. No difference in animation. So if you're looking at the ancient Tom and Jerry cartoons, if you're looking at The Simpsons, you're looking at South Park, that's 2D. If you're actually looking at everything that Pixar does, that's 3D. So there is a fundamental, really great, amazing advantage when you're actually using 2D and you are a company or an individual who actually wants a 2D animation,
Mm.
character based, or little animals or little things or whatnot. Uh, it's a lot cheaper to develop.
Yeah.
It's cheaper and faster because you don't have all of the rendering, all of the lighting, all of the rigging that you actually need to do for 3D animation. In 3D animation, you are dealing with the depth, you're dealing with that third dimension. And it's very, very important that, if you go hair in 3D animation, then that hair needs to move like real hair. And if it is 3D animation, the face, the light on the face, the colors of the face, it needs to be hit in a certain specific way so that you're creating that illusion of your third dimension. You do that, for everything. And that's why also a fully fledged 3D cartoon is actually going, or animated feature, I should say,
Yeah, yeah.
is obviously going to take a very, very long production time because of all of these additional people working on all additional elements. 2D animation is much faster because if you consider, for example, how quickly an episode of The Simpsons is actually turned out every season, you can actually see the difference there. Once the script is actually locked in, once the recording, and all of those sorts of things are actually, already decided, the actual animation takes a fraction of the time of what a 3D Pixar 30 minutes will actually take. So the 3D animation is more similar to stop motion animation, what Aardman does, as opposed to what we can actually do in 2D. Now, before anyone is wondering why do I actually prefer 2D, is it a practical reason or it's not actually, is a personal preference of mine. I love 2D. I love the sort of cartoons I used to watch when I was a child, from Wiley to Tom and Jerry, to anything else. I loved the Japanese cartoons. I've watched
Yeah.
shed loads of those. I love them. They're all 2D. And, I love the look and feel of 2D. And The Simpsons for me never gets old. And yes, maybe the first 8 to 10 series are sort of funnier and grittier than they are now for very obvious reasons, but it doesn't matter because I still love them and I still watch them with the same joy as I sit down to watch a new Kitchen Nightmares by Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sort of in the same camp with The Simpsons actually, in terms of the gold.
Yeah, is it a problem that South Park is 2D? Are you kidding?
I think, yeah, and just what, that's so relatable for people watching this as well. It's very nostalgic, and I love the fact that it
Yeah.
kind of goes back to when your childhood, when you were a child or a young person, like all these things you grew up with. like that's
Yes.
so
And
cool.
that's also actually something else the psychologists have actually proven through the tests insofar as animation is concerned that
Yeah.
when people see 2D character-based animation, they actually respond to it subliminally because most children of certain generations actually had that as a first contact with the screen. It is the 2D animation. And to be honest with you, if you even think about what else is actually happening right now in that sort of space, there are very many cartoons that continue to be just as popular because, as my mom says, there's a child born every second, right? If not multitudes of them.
Yeah.
And therefore, there's always someone who is actually ready to watch The Lion King from 1994, I think it was, for the first time. There's always someone who will be watching, Bugs Bunny and Duffy and all of those
Yeah, yeah.
guys for the first time. It doesn't matter that now we can actually make, animated features that look like really lifelike, or we can actually make a Doom. We can make Doom look like, real people, which is very, very different from the Doom of 30 odd years ago.
Oh
But
yeah.
we're still responding to that. It doesn't matter to me that Lara Croft now looks so much more enhanced than she did in
Yeah.
1996 because the game still, the early games still retain that wonderful playability.
So it's like this whole idea of being playful but believable. Am I
Yeah.
understanding right? Like playful but authentic kind of thing.
Yes, yes, playful but believable. I made a number of video CVs that, um, the playful but believable really, really comes into its own. There is one that is always knocking around on my LinkedIn because it's been reposted a number of times, which is Maninder's CV. She's this wonderful lady who has very similar background to mine, same age pretty much, and she also works in like IT slash risk. She works in risk, if I remember correctly.
Mhm.
And number of years ago, I think 2 years ago or so, um, she saw what I was making, and she asked me. Therefore, she became a client of mine to actually have a video CV made. And I'm telling you, that single video CV, because not every video CV I've made, I've been able to flog on LinkedIn. You can understand that a video CV is a little bit like a training course. A training course for a company is private, is under NDA. And a video CV, if you're coming to me and you want a video CV made, it's one thing if you are you know, um, a contractor and you're used to being out there in the open and telling everybody that you exist and that hey, you're always open to new opportunities. But it's very different if you're actually working for a company and you're thinking, look, I'm thinking of leaving and I want a video CV made and I'll make that happen in due course. So very often I cannot showcase those CVs because I understand that the person who had it made wants to keep the career move, off the radar or LinkedIn or social media in general. However, Maninda, being a contractor, does not suffer from the oh my gosh, I shouldn't be known that I'm looking for a
Yeah,
job.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so she has, once I actually delivered her video CV, she actually put a link on her LinkedIn profile. Watch my video CV here. I think she's hosting it on, we landed on Dropbox, if I remember correctly. So that whoever she's actually getting in touch with can just click on that link, go and watch her video CV. And that video CV really does nail that, authentic by book playful because at the point in time when I actually put this shot into Canary Wharf, because I used the picture of Canary Wharf so it looks real,
Nice.
and then you see the animated her coming on scene and saying, "Hi, I am so and so, and I do this and that."
That's cool.
Everybody that has watched it is like, "Oh my gosh, this is so cool! I want the same," and I can see why there is that reaction. I absolutely can, particularly if you're actually also mixing a real life environment, such as a picture of Canary Wharf, and it could have even been a video, and Maninder could have actually walked on the video, and people are just like falling off their chairs and thinking, "Oh, this is so cool. This is so,
I'm curious to know this actually, Steph. One thing as you're talking there that I thought of is, when you're putting these animations together, Are you drawing upon specific details that you've seen from popular culture, like, be it a TV show or a movie or something like that? Are you sort of consciously doing that when you
It
put?
depends. It depends on what I'm doing. So, time and time ago, I actually created a security video that was a little bit in the style of Mission Impossible. So, the first Mission Impossible, again, I'm showing my age. I'm going back 30 odd years. There are 8 movies now. But I'm really thinking about the original one, in which is actually stealing that blasted knock list. And so, obviously, what I created in that video about security, and it was turned turning the problem on its head, right? It was actually showcasing the vulnerabilities of a system. And it was very easy for me to just sort of think, oh, I'm gonna do like a Mission Impossible slash Bond like, type of environment. And I think that even someone, who isn't thinking particularly about Mission Impossible can, recognize and can see the sort of references of an Ethan Hunt type of person um, you know breaking into the vault where he can actually get the knock list from. Very often, I like to actually create something that is significant to the individual, particularly if, for example, it is a video CV that we're talking about. So I would be asking the individual, so what do you like to do in your spare time? So if the individual is into gardening, or I don't know, yes, throwing garden parties and having people at barbecue, then I have the individual talk about their, on the video, they will be talking about their work experience, but they will be in that setting so that you're somewhat killing two birds with one stone. You give that impression, the subliminal sense to the viewer that this person likes gardening because I've actually put her in the video watering the plants and she's just there and cutting the flowers. But she is talking about her experience as a security consultant for such and such bank.
Details
So,
like that, isn't it? It's just little details like that that
yeah.
humanize people, really kind of make you feel like you know them better. I love that. That's really cool.
Yeah, you can do that very easily because, as I said, you can talk about somebody's experience where you actually put them in a certain context, or you can actually put the character surfing because that's what they actually do in their spare time, but they're talking about what they actually do at work.
Yeah.
So, and I've done that even for I myself, for my own, some of my advertorials, I've actually put myself in sort of situations like sort of getting ready in the morning and I'm using certain products and I'm in the bathroom and I'm washing my face and I'm talking about my experience and what I will do in the day. So you can do so much. I just wish, in a sense, that people were more gutsy about it, which goes back to the why do we continue with all of these opportunities to actually make videos either for ourselves or for others, or by coming to someone like me, why do we continue to try and churn out boring videos that no one wants to watch when we have the opportunity to elevate your CV to a level that no one has actually really done before? Because ultimately, a video CV is not going to get you a job no more than a fantastic PDF is going to get you a job. The purpose of a CV is to open a door for you to have a conversation.
Yeah.
It's not about, oh, is someone actually going to offer me a job just because I sent that PDF? No one is going to do that. But what they will do is giving you a call back because your CV was so interesting. And that's what you want.
Well, that's to be honest, that actually answers my next question, which was about the biggest benefits of 2D animation. But let's delve into that a bit more. So obviously the title of this podcast is The Impact of 2D
Yep.
Animation. But how kind of far reaching can its impact be and its benefits be? Because, I thought that it was one of these things that mostly businesses use, but you've mentioned obviously there about video CVs,
Oh,
people
yeah.
self-employed. So can we go into all the different benefits of 2D animation,
Yeah.
depending on
Yeah,
who?
yeah, absolutely. And I was actually talking to a friend of mine, the impact specialist, Rachel Dunford, last week, because it was in fact Rachel who was talking to me about. the impact of 2D animation. Because, I am very results oriented and money oriented, as I said in some of the posts that I was responding to on LinkedIn today.
Yeah.
And therefore, if I'm actually thinking about 2D animation, I immediately think, I'm going to save you time, Neil, because if you're coming to me and you actually want such and such a video, then you don't have to worry about anything. You give me the brief, I'll go away, and a week later, bang, there is your video. And yes, we can do some edits, but ultimately, I just free your mind and your table and your desk from another item on your to-do list,
Yeah.
right? I think in those terms. I'm going to free your time. I'm going to get you that sort of return on investment as instead of actually having a video or a CV that is actually falling into a black hole where all CVs go to die. You will actually get a call back straight away because the recruiter will tell you, oh my God, Steph, I've actually never seen a 30-second introduction animated like that. Oh, really? Did you make it? Did someone else make it? Because I had those conversations myself. That's when I actually really, really figured out that, there is a market for it. And the impact is above and beyond what I actually imagine it is. It's not just a matter of I can buy you time, you pay me to do something for you. It's
Yeah.
not just a transactional like that. I can make you memorable because, even though animation has existed for a long, long time, so few individuals and so few companies actually use it to its full potential. When I actually created an entire suite of training videos that then were actually distributed within a certain company through the learning management system, as they usually are, I actually spoke to the guy who was actually running all of this some months down the line. And we were talking about other stuff because I end up making friends left and right if I can, right? So we were actually talking about other things. And he said to me, do you know the uptake of those videos that you actually made for us? That normally people are sort of skimming through them or they don't actually want to do them or we have to send them, countless reminders. Well, they were all entirely, animated videos and they actually had like 100% everybody actually doing them, but not just the ticking boxes, actually watching the videos because the learning management system was also telling them how long a person was actually staying on a video.
Yeah.
Uh, so, those are very big results that, in a sense, don't surprise me because I was at the receiving end of those really hideous trainings that no one wanted to sit through. So, I don't need convincing that a really beautiful animated video is going to be more interesting for your people to watch to the end and to actually really retain what is actually happening in that video. Because I know that that's the way it works. I know that psychologically we actually respond better to something like that than a document. And I even, Neil, I even talk as a reader. I love to read. So I'm not the sort of person who goes, oh my God, I can only manage 140 characters. Or, oh no, no, too long, they don't read. And I'm like, oh my God, my brain is bigger than a flea. So I can actually read for extensive periods of time. I'm reading Marble Hall Murders by Horowitz that runs into, I think, 500 pages. I didn't check. And I can retain the information. Woo, you know. But I also know that out there is always that drive to, oh, we want micro learnings because we don't want to saddle our people with videos that run into 30 minutes. And I'm like, okay, don't saddle them. And
Yeah.
so we're going to have 25 videos that run into 1 minute each. You still have
Yeah.
25
Yeah.
minutes. But anyway,
Absolutely.
and
So,
um,
yeah.
and you do all these sorts of things, and then they actually get back to you and say, "Oh my gosh, they were actually watching the law, and it went really well." Or of course, the video CV or the property investor that is actually refashioning, his social media presence and wants to sort of float to the top like cream on top of coffee so that he's actually noticed a little bit as he's establishing himself instead of just falling into the black hole of yet another middle-aged guy talking to his phone.
Yeah. I love that. The cream on the top of the coffee, was it? That's
Hmm.
brilliant. I love that. And you've touched on it a bit there, but like how How would you go about measuring the ROI of 2D animation? Obviously you've talked there about, how many people watch the video all the way through. Are there any other examples of ROI that you would recommend people look at?
Well, certainly it depends on the purpose, right? What sort of video is it that they're actually having made? Is it a video that, for example, I don't know, crops up on social media and points at the website and entices you to actually go and take up the offer on your website? Then that is really the metric that you really wanted to look at. If it is a CV, or as I also like to call an animated cover letter, please excuse me for that, but um, because very often, everybody says, oh, cover letters are useless, but you still have companies that want a cover letter. Well, I actually, created 30-second sort of template for I myself to reuse when I actually make those sort of videos. So your return on investment is you spent to have this 30-second video made. Did you actually manage to have conversations on the back of sending this out as opposed to a PDF, a CV in your classic PDF format? That is a metric that you may want to be looking at, certainly. Or last year, I also managed to make an animated book trailer for a client of mine who had this wonderful book called Rediscovered published, or rather, she was on the run up to publication, and she said, really love what you're doing, Steph. I would like that to advertise my book. And I was like, great, we can do it. Probably I would suggest 30, 45 seconds, something like that. I ended up making 50, if I'm not mistaken. There is no voiceover, it's just music, it's just the concepts of the book. She became an Amazon bestseller in her in her field. And I saw that video just knocking about left, right, and center on all the social media and on her own website because she also created a separate website for the book. So, depending on the purpose for your video, and if you will have, of course, different metrics. And if you're making videos or you want a video or a multitude of different infographics as well, because I do that too. An infographic is also a form of animation if you do put animated elements in it. You know, if you're doing all of this sort of stuff, for visibility, then I can guarantee you will be seen exactly as my stuff actually gets seen on LinkedIn. I haven't posted in like 2 months because of my house move, which you and I discussed separately.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
people watching now, you can tell because my books are still all stacked behind me under the table to the back to the room in the fireplace. There you go. And obviously, we were talking about all of that. I haven't posted since the beginning of March when I really had to crank up thinking about the move. But the commission, the phone calls, and the DMs have not stopped because I have got anyway sort of an amount of stuff that is sitting both on my LinkedIn and on my own website, which is linkedinfamous.co.uk. And you can actually see what I do. It's very, very obvious, and you either like it or you don't. I don't really find people who are just like talking to me for like 6 months and then they go meh. No, people who come and talk to me, they know what they're gonna get. And they're not gonna come to me if they just want an Adobe type of video, or flashes and all like, all the stuff that you can create on CapCut. Well, I'm
Yeah.
not stopping you. You can do that.
Do you know what? It's so good the way you position yourself. Obviously, I'll link to your LinkedIn page when I put this episode out. But like when people go on your LinkedIn page, they'll see this. You've got your value proposition on there, what you're going to do for people. You've got your pricing on there, you've got examples of your work, you've got like clear calls to action. Like it's so well put together, your profile, and it's a great advert for what you do. And I think as well, just as a kind of general comment, throughout this episode, it's been incredible to find out what you can do with 2D animation, because I didn't know this, and I'm sure most people that watch this won't have known this either. So if you don't get one or two messages from interested customers after this, I'd be amazed, to be honest. Because
It's okay. There's time. They can
yeah,
sit on it.
No, no, it's good. It's really, really good. And I think,
But
yeah,
myself and Stasia, aforementioned, of course, my work wife and voiceover actor, and she's fantastic and in many other ways. Anyway, me and Stasia, every 2 weeks now on a Friday, we have a LinkedIn Live, and now we've just
yeah,
chucked it out also on my Instagram and on YouTube. So, if people want to watch there, they can. So there is a lot of stuff and a lot of information that I continue to put out there that doesn't make me feel wedded to a LinkedIn post.
yeah,
There is a lot of stuff that people can actually look at both on my existing website and on LinkedIn. There are a lot of documents. There are PDFs that I also created in the past, and there are lots of infographics. And just yesterday, I actually finished an infographic for someone else so that she can advertise her networking group. So there's a lot that we can do, and I would say to people, be a little bit brave. Oh my God. Now everybody's actually complaining that, oh, videos are everywhere, no one is watching. Yeah, because maybe, they're just seeing more of the same.
mm,
I'm not watching the video of someone who is just talking to the camera, just like, walking down the street. And, I would like something a little bit more creative and a little bit more
yeah.
thought about, because I
That,
like to spend time thinking about a message or something that we're making.
well, yeah, and that's really important to be considered in that way. I mean, what that's actually something that's just come to my head is like, just to kind of round off what we've talked about, what would be, if you had to pick, say, 3 to 5 key takeaways from this episode, what would you like them to be? Obviously, you mentioned there about the importance of being brave. Are there any other kind of key takeaways?
I
Uh,
really would say do not be afraid to be a little bit twee, a little bit kitsch, a little bit, off center in the medium that you actually use, because that's what a 2D animation can actually do for you. I just mentioned the live with Stacia that I advertise every so often because every 2 weeks on a Friday we do that. I think we did it last week, if I'm not mistaken. So we're skipping this. And when I actually created that graphic, which I then flog on Instagram and I flog it on LinkedIn, if I want to put hearts in there, I put hearts. If I want to put flowers, I actually put flowers. Now we're actually using very, very simple sort of metaphors about weeding the garden after we've actually planted our ideas and see what sticks. So I am just going all out for it with like a garden, and you can see a little animated, Stasia who is actually pruning. So, do that in your face sort of humor. You shouldn't really be afraid of doing something like that because people will notice it on the basis that no one else does it.
Amazing. And yeah, final question, the same question I always ask guests at the end. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you or ask any questions?
Oh yeah, of course. I'm always knocking around LinkedIn, even when I don't post. I always respond to the comments of my friends' posts instead. So I'm always knocking around LinkedIn as Steph Walsh, the feel good animator. I've got also an Instagram profile. Some things go in there as well, but it's more my private life and my pictures. I also have the Feel Good Animator on YouTube, and that's where the end-to-end Dr. Seuss All the Places You Go is actually sitting.
Amazing. Well, as I said, I'll put the links in the description
Yes.
when I
And
upload.
my website is linked to also from my profile is linkedinfamous.co.uk.
And you've now got me thinking about all the forms of 2D animation from my childhood. I'm going to go and watch some Rugrats and Hey
Oh
Arnold
yes.
for this. What is it? Rugrats, Recess, Hey Arnold. Oh yeah, there were a few. Anyway, that's a discussion for another time. Steph, thank you so much for
Brilliant.
coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.